If you're anything like me, you're a guitarist. And if you're not a guitarist, I have very serious concerns about why you would be watching this channel. And if you are a guitarist, then you probably really enjoy making loud noises. And no, I'm not talking about fart noises, but those are pretty good too. And if you're a boomer guitarist, then you probably like big 100-watt tube amps because they make the loudest noises. But unfortunately, if you are a guitarist, you are also probably not very smart. And chances are you have gone out and bought one of those 100-watt tube amplifiers to make very loud noises, but then immediately signed on to the Gear Talk forum and complained about how your Marshall JMP 2203 can't be played whisper quiet next to your newborn baby. It's the age-old conundrum of being a guitarist and enjoying loud tube amps, but never really being able to play them to their full extent unless you want everyone within a 5-mile radius to beat you repeatedly with a baseball bat. And with the advent of modern technology, not only have tube amps gotten smaller, quieter, and more compact, but we also have plenty of other fantastic options as far as playing, practicing, and recording at basically no volume and no disturbance to people we actually care about. But because guitars are stupid, some of us still want to be able to play our beloved big loud tube amps, but just quieter. And luckily for people like us, this problem was solved many, many years ago by the attenuator. So today we're gonna talk a little bit about attenuators, what they do, how they work, the different types of attenuators, and then we're gonna see this attenuator in action because the folks over at Dynasty Pro Audio sent me their PAT1 passive 100-watt power attenuator. So we're gonna crank some amps and see what this bad boy can do for our bedroom tone enthusiasts. Let's do it. Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle and welcome to Belligerent Studios. What I do here is I take all sorts of awesome high gain related guitar equipment, I record it with a simple setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into East End or thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes with Hank Hill butt, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks. All right, guys, so today we are gonna touch on the topic of attenuators, something that I personally have never really sunk that much time and energy into. And there are a couple of reasons behind that. Number one being I am blessed with the ability to usually be able to play a tube amp fairly loud if I want to. And again, I say blessed because that is a blessing. In today's modern world, that is getting harder and harder. But the other reason is I'm cheap, and attenuators are typically pretty expensive. So when Dynasty Pro Audio offered to reach out to me to send that PAT1, and I saw that it was a very affordable power attenuator, I kind of felt a little bit better about it because I could show my audience a really affordable option in knocking down the volume of their amplifier. But with that being said, you guys should know Dynasty Pro Audio did sponsor this video. They are paying me to share the PAT1 with you guys here on the channel. So feel free to take what I have to say with a massive grain of salt. You're more than fair to do so, but just know I'm gonna give you my honest thoughts and opinions as I always do, so keep that in mind. So what is an attenuator? What is the definition of an attenuator? An attenuator is something that basically reduces the strength of a signal. And when it comes to guitar amplification, an attenuator is something that goes in between your amplifier and your cabinet that basically absorbs some of the signal and the energy coming out of your amplifier, turns it into heat and dissipates it while sending the desired amount of signal into your guitar cabinet. And therefore, by reducing this signal, this also significantly reduces your volume. Now, there are two different types of attenuators. There are passive and there are reactive attenuators. Passive are pretty simple circuits. Typically, you send the signal into a passive attenuator. They have a bunch of resistors in there, which essentially soak up some of that signal depending on how much you basically want them to soak up. Because much like the Dynasty Pro Audio unit that is sent here, you have a control that basically tells the resistors how much of that signal that you want soaked up before the rest of it goes on to your speaker cabinet. These are very simple designs and they are very cost effective. The downsides of something like a passive attenuator is they will change how your amp sounds and reacts, and how much so depends on the individual attenuator. But just know if you're going with a passive attenuator, they are going to have an effect on the sound of your amplifier. So if that matters to you, then I would suggest going with something from the other category of attenuators, reactive attenuators. Reactive attenuators are much more complex circuits, and I'm not even gonna try to describe what's going on inside of those things because I don't know. The long and short of it is basically there's a lot more than just resistors soaking up that energy, and what all of those additional electronic components do is that they shape the way that your amp sounds and feels while also soaking up that additional current that is being sent from your guitar amp into the amplifier and then finally to your speaker cabinet. And the purpose for this is you can kind of design them to do what you want them to do, meaning you can design them to be completely transparent. You can design them with different impedance curves that will affect how the amplifier itself reacts. And that's why you'll find that certain people have different favorite attenuators if they've tried them, because the reactive attenuators, they all have a little bit of a different sound, a little bit of a different feel, and they generally are basically meant to kind of keep the tone of your amplifier a little bit more intact as you knock the volume down. But because of this more complex circuitry, that means they're more expensive. And some of them can get very expensive. But depending on how much you want to spend, some of them will give you more for your money. Some of them have impulse response technology built in and other features. It really just depends on what you're looking for and what you want to pay. So now that we know the difference between the two types of attenuators, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this passive attenuator that Dynasty Pro Audio sent me real quick, and then we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna hook it up in the other room, and we're gonna test a couple of different amplifiers out on it. But yeah, the PAT1 is, you know, it's your everyday passive attenuator. You've got a large dial or control here that allows you to determine how much signal you want to send to your speaker cabinet, and it's kind of like your secondary volume control. We've also got a line level control on here because this PAT1 unit actually has a line out, and it also has an XLR mic sim. So if you want to record or send this to the front of house, you've got both of those options. The line out will not have a cab impulse response on it. The mic sim has a built-in simulation on it. And other than that, we just have 3 simple inputs here for the ohm rating you'd like to select with your amp. And then finally, we have our speaker output, where our speaker cable then goes into the cabinet after being attenuated by the PAT1. So this thing is designed to handle 100 watts, but when you are using attenuators like this, be careful. Be careful when you're using attenuators or load boxes in general, because much like Henning Pauly found out not that long ago, if you have an amp like a vintage Marshall and you crank it, you're gonna get a whole lot more than 100 watts. And even if you don't have a vintage Marshall and you have an amplifier that does put out a true 100 watts, if you have that amplifier fully cranked and sending its full output into an attenuator like this, these things will get very hot because they are literally turning your signal, your power from your amplifier into heat and then dissipating it. So if you basically don't give it a chance to catch its breath by cranking that tube amplifier and playing for a long period of time, there's a very good chance you could not only damage or destroy the attenuator, but your amp is going to be soon to follow. So you just want to be careful when it comes to that stuff. Use it, don't abuse it, and then you won't lose it. So with that said, we're gonna hook this up to a few different amplifiers, a few different style amplifiers, so we can simulate basically different situations in using this. And we're gonna get some sounds and some sound measurements so you guys can see this thing in action. Let's do it! All right guys, so I'm currently in my jam room here. I have selected 3 different amplifiers to kind of show you 3 different scenarios in which something like this passive attenuator from Dynasty Pro Audio would make sense to use in. The first off being the Marshall JMP 2203. You know what this is, one of the greatest amplifiers of all time, but as many people love to tell me in my comment sections, you have to have it turned up super duper loud in order for it to sound its best. And frankly, low volume playing is just not even in the question with this amplifier. This amp is almost kind of a mix between the 2 other amps that we're going to be checking out, in that it has a master volume and it can sound good without being cranked, but a lot of people like the sound of this amplifier being cranked, and basically that's the only way that they would consider playing it. The second amplifier is a Marshall 1987 clone, which is essentially an older 50-watt plexi style circuit. That amplifier has no master volume, which means as you turn up the 2 individual volumes because it has 2 separate volumes for the 2 separate channels. 2 separate channels can be jumpered and active at the same time, which essentially gives you that vintage plexi sound, but only if the amplifier is cranked, because the amp is essentially a clean amp or an edge of breakup amp until you really start to get it way too loud to be able to play in most modern situations. So that way we'll be able to crank that amplifier and essentially test out what it's going to sound like going through this attenuator and basically being able to get the goods out of it. And then finally, we have my favorite, pretty much everybody who watches this channel's favorite, the classic Peavey 5150 or 6505. And the reason that I wanted to use that amplifier is I've seen more posts than I can count from people who are basically like, how do I get my 5150 to basically be usable at bedroom volumes? Because if you know the 5150 or the 6505, you know that that volume control is essentially off on. Yes, it has range to it, but there really is not any range in the bedroom level range. You know what I mean. So those are the 3 amplifiers we're going to test. I am using my Balaguer Seraph Evertune here with the Seymour Duncan Nazgul rails and the bridge, and we are going into a Marshall 1960 AC Classic cab. This has the 90s Greenback M25 reissue speakers in it. I'll be recording this with an SM57, and I will be adjusting the mic signal based on how loud this setup is here so that you guys can get an accurate idea. And then finally, the sister company or a related company to Dynasty Pro Audio, Soundavo, I think that's how you say it, sent me their SLD1 sound level display. This is essentially a digital decibel meter, but unlike a lot of the cheaper ones that basically just have a poopy mic in the display, this one actually has an external mic that you can put out in front or wherever you want in the room, and it basically more accurately measures the actual sound pressure levels. So when I do this, you can see how loud I'm being annoying. So that is going to give you guys a really good indication of how much sound or how much volume that the Dynasty Pro Audio 1 attenuator here is going to be knocking off of our amplifiers. All right, I'm talking a lot. Here we go. First off, I'm gonna play the Marshall 2203 without the attenuator in the circuit, and I'm gonna crank it. That's why I've got earplugs in, and we're basically gonna see how loud it is in the room with the decibel meter. All right, I definitely don't want to do that too long because I don't want to blow my nice greenbacks here. This 2203 will definitely put out way more than 100 watts. This is the loudest amplifier that I own, and 120 decibels, like, when I play a Peavey 5150 loud live, that thing is like 115 decibels. So this thing is super, super loud. So now let's hook up the PAT1. Okay guys, attenuator is now in the circuit. One thing to note is even just hooking up this attenuator will automatically knock the volume down. Even if you have the speaker level control here dialed to the max, it's still gonna bring the volume down automatically. So keep that in mind. So with this thing in the circuit, I've got the amp cranked basically right where you start to get power amp distortion. I don't want to push too hard, but in saying that, with the control dialed basically all the way down to 0, just above 0 gets you bedroom level volumes. Out of a cranked Marshall JMP 2203. Now, does it color the sound? Yeah, it's gonna color the sound. It's gonna make things sound different, especially if you're really rolling off the output using the speaker control. Now, Dynasty Pro Audio claims that between 90% and 10% using a sound measurement tool, that there was basically little change on their end when they measured it. That is what they claim. I cannot verify that, and I'll let you guys use your ears to make the decision. But again, this gives you the option to play your roaring Marshall at basically bedroom levels. But also, if you want your stage volume out of it, you can just turn the level back up. And you can still get an appreciable stage volume if you're being mic'd up or whatever with the attenuator in the circuit. One thing I didn't really think of before is you could turn this down to 0 and you're getting no volume through the cabinet, which essentially means that you can kind of use this thing as a load box. But I mean, it gives you that option with the line out. You could send it right into your interface, put an IR on it, and there you go. You got your recorded tones. But I am simply trying to show this to you guys as an attenuator. So that is how it worked on the Marshall 2203. Obviously, it was able to reduce a significant amount of volume if that's what you want to do. Let's move on to the 1987 clone. Okay guys, the 1987 is now hooked up. I have taken the PAT1 out of the circuit. So this is the amp with no attenuator and no decibel meter apparently. So it was so loud that the decibel meter completely tapped out there. Again, we were hitting that 120 decibel limit on this thing. And yeah, it was insanely loud here in the room. As you can see, basically, it started as a clean amp. You would turn it up and it would start to get more distorted. That's how these amplifiers work. So if you want to get the most amount, like gain out of them, you usually need an attenuator because you just can't play at those levels anymore unless you're a rock star. And look at me. I'm no rock star. So again, now with the PAT1 in the circuit, all right, so that's as loud as the amp gets. Let's go ahead and turn down the speaker level. So again, you can basically get it down to whisper levels while still getting the full power amp distortion goodness out of a circuit like the 1987, the 50 watt plexi. And because this is a 50 watt plexi, we're probably not going to be going above 100 watts. So that means that we will be able to push this a little bit harder and be able to use the attenuator for longer without having to worry about frying it or the amplifier. So food for thought. So last but not least, let's get that 5150 up there for all you chuggaroos. All right, guys, you know the drill. 6505, no attenuator in the circuit. Let's get that volume level up. so that's as loud as she goes. And again, I don't want to blow my nice greenbacks, so I'm assuming we're just over that 120 decibel threshold. It's loud. This amp, stupidly loud. But again, here is us trying to get like a bedroom tone out of it. That actually doesn't sound too bad. I wouldn't be too mad at that if I was not trying to get murdered by my significant other. But anyways, let's put the attenuator in. Four on a healthy 5150 is the loudest I've ever turned up in a show setting, and I'm sure that I was too loud. So keep that in mind. So yeah, that's it for attenuators today. If you guys would like to check out the Dynasty Pro Audio PAT1 attenuator for yourself, these go for $149.99. I'll drop some links down below in the description and the comments for you to check it out. If you are interested in one of these decibel meters, the Sound Level Display 1, SLD1 is what it is, by Soundavo. These go for $399. I will drop a link down below in the description and the comments for that. Thank you to Dynasty Pro Audio for sponsoring the video. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about my little presentation on attenuators? What did you think about this attenuator? And what is your favorite attenuator that you have used? If you have used them before, drop that stuff down below in the comments. I really do appreciate each and every one of you that engages with this channel. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time. Staring contest.